I hope you're having a good day. Welcome. This is Resolve to Live Forward. I'm John Morrow, and I am coming to you by way of a number of podcast platforms through the hosting services of Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout is putting this out not just on Spotify and on in the Apple podcast store. It's also putting this out across some other podcasting platforms. I'll not share them with you right now. In addition to that, since I am recording this not just in audio but in video, I have a YouTube channel, and you're welcome to check out that YouTube channel. Just look at Resolve to Live Forward. Look up John Morrow. You will find me. I forgot to mention to you whenever I was with you in our last gathering that we have had an experience. I say I had the opportunity to give a TED Talk. It was a TEDx that was put together in Lake Alfred, Florida. Lake Alfred, Florida is where I, it's in the county in Central Florida where I live. I live in Lakeland, Florida, which is in what we would call Northwest Polk County. And Polk County, by the way, geographically, as far as counties are concerned in this part of the country, and particularly in the state of Florida, Polk County is a very large county geographically. And it's also a very rapidly growing county in terms of the population and the development. And that's because we're in close proximity, not just to Tampa, Florida, which is to the west, but to the east, what we call the greater Orlando metro area, and specifically that area around Walt Disney World. There is an area up there that we sometimes refer to affectionately as Four Corners. You take Polk County, which is the county I live in. Right next to us, we are also bordered by other counties, but among those counties that are in the Orlando direction, there is Lake County, Osceola County, and Orange County. So we call it the Four Corners. And right there in that particular sweet spot, which is in northeast Polk County, you have got some towns that are growing, and nestled in there is an incredibly amazing little oasis of a town, and it's growing as well. And it's called Lake Alfred. And Lake Alfred has this beautiful park, McKay Park, which borders on the Lake Alfred. And if you stand on the back porch of McKay House, which is the landmark, legendary, historic site that sits in that park, among so many, many other things, you can look across Lake Alfred and see the area of Northeast Winter Haven, Florida. So that kind of gives you some geographical proximity. Why did I share that with you? Because the location was unique. There was not a building on the site that could really house the typical type of crowds you'd have for a TEDx, but there was this incredible solid brick patio area, and a stage was set up. And what we did was we had our TEDx completely outdoors. So when you see me in this Lake Alfred TEDx, or TEDx Lake Alfred as it's listed in YouTube, you'll actually see me standing on stage, and you'll see nature behind me, a breeze blowing. You get an idea of what Florida looks like. And this particular day that we did this event was February the 21st. Would you believe that the temperature that day, by the time that I actually stood on that platform that afternoon, sometime around 3 p.m., was in the middle 80s. It was dry, it was not humid, but I can tell you, wearing that black sport coat, I was plenty warm, but it was a great experience for me. And I talked about the idea of living forward as choice. That was the subject matter. Why all the setup on this particular situation? Quite simply, it is a choice. And I want to point something out to you here. Yes, I gave this speech. I talked about the premise of living forward. It is a choice. It's intentional. It's very intentional. But what you need to understand is that it's not easy. The background, as you know, in my story, and I have, of course, my book, which I wrote and was published back in November of 2023, Resolve, Your Blueprint for Intentional Success. And it is available in a Kindle download as well as in a paperback version. In the book, I tell the story of the power word that my late wife Donna and I created and chose to live by back in 2017. I particularly focus on how important that power word and the 7 behaviors that we ascribed out of the 7 letters that comprise that power word, RESOLVE. I talked about how those behaviors equip you, I think, mentally, emotionally, and maybe even spiritually. And there's a physical component as well. They equip you to set forth and put forth a behavioral practice that gives you a meaningful purpose for a successful forward living life. The term resolve to live forward, which is the title of this podcast, grew out of that. The TEDx speech, Living Forward is a Choice, grew out of that. All of this setup here, which I've been talking to you about for the better part of 5 minutes, is to tell you a true story from a very personal perspective. Over the course of these last 2.5 years that I've been doing this podcast, I repeatedly go back to the principal core of what it's all about. Resolve is defined in this particular situation based upon the choice my wife and I made. It's defined as one having a definite, firm plan of action. We chose a power word because we failed at resolutions. Resolutions for some people are no-brainers. They state a resolution, it becomes set in stone, if I could use that. But resolutions, generally speaking, on the vast majority of people who make them, don't last. But I'm not here to debate whether that's good, that's bad, humorous, whatsoever. I just know that for my wife and I, we were very bad at resolution. We decided to choose a power word. It was decided with sincere intentionality. When we chose this word, we understood the definition that we picked, and there are multiple definitions surrounding the word resolve. We chose the one that made it seem almost empirical and imperative that we have a definite plan of action. Every day should have an end in mind. Now, is it a perfect system? Certainly not. I'll add one more component. It wasn't that long. We adopted this word in November of 2017 to begin the year 2018. We carried that word with us forward through 2018 and the events that occurred, and we began 2019 still espousing that word, now not just as a power word for the year, but a power word for living, for life. It was in 2019 that my wife died. It was in 2019, on that day in early June, that I watched my wife die. The most devastating moment in my life. Nothing had ever happened to me during the course of my life prior to that event that could even come close to it. And I'm thankful to say, for the most part, nothing like it has happened since. But one thing that has continued to happen that lingers, I don't think linger necessarily is what it is. It's more like this is the damage and the scarring and the burden that you must carry going forward. That kind of grief, sorrow, anguish, it changes you. And this is where you have to begin to do a much harder type of personal work. You have to really have a framework if you're going to somehow, some way, some form, shape, and fashion live forward. And by living forward, I mean doing productive things, getting the most out of every day that you are given. Accept the fact that no day is promised, but if you awaken to the dawn of a new day, that new day presents opportunity. It also is very much an important message to you, as it is to me, that there will be things that will happen that I planned. There will be things that I will do on the spur of the moment. And there will be things in situations that will happen without warning. And the whole principle of the behaviors contained and outlined in the 7 letters in the word resolve represent intentional choice behaviors. Resolve, Resolve. For those of you that know this and have heard it, I apologize for the redundancy, but let this soak in. During that day, ideally, and it takes intentionality, you've got to do it. You practice resilience. You engage every opportunity, and that includes the people that you possibly will come in contact with. You see life as an opportunity to serve, and to serve not just in a reciprocity situation, but take it a step further and do selfless, even sacrificial service. You have some type of an organizational plan, but you also never let the plan restrict you from the idea that if you go back to engagement, there are going to be surprises. Now, are all surprises good? Certainly not. But the process of being able to know what to do when confronted with something to engage or to disengage from, that is all part of the resilience, the service, the thinking. But let's take it a step further. In the organization, you also have structure. Structure is good. And structure is everything from how you take care of yourself, how you care for your home, how you care for whatever you have that may be in your home that you're responsible for being the caretaker of. In my case, 3 kitty cats. Then, of course, there is the structure of the family, my son, my daughter-in-law, my 2 granddaughters, as well as my sister, my nieces, and of course, my brother and sister-in-law. And these are the people that I have the opportunity in the organizational process to prioritize time for them to be meaningful in their lives. Now let's keep on moving. We've done RESO. Now we have the L. This is something that I do, and I do without hesitation. I love learning, and learning involves everything from listening to books on Audible to reading books to watching documentaries, and I love YouTube as an example of that. But also I'm learning in terms of putting myself out there as a communicator, a speaker. This whole process of what I'm doing here, where I'm producing a podcast and I'm putting it out across communications mediums, is something that I learn because I intentionally learn. So learning is an intentional behavior. Loving to learn is also an important part of that. And I do love the idea of learning. I don't want to go through any day and not learn something or lots of things that I didn't know before. I'm also learning more about my feelings and emotions, and I'm beginning to understand that as much as I want to be the best version of myself, there is this damage that I carry that has scarred me, and that damage is permanent. The learning process involves, how do I handle that? How do I will myself to move forward? Which brings us now to something else. There's a powerful component in vision. Being visionary is not daydreaming. Let me say that again. Being visionary is not daydreaming. Now, granted, I do dream. I daydream and a night dream. I don't have any control over night dreaming, but I do have control over daydreaming. Is my daydreaming and what I'm putting into my mind providing a healthy outcome? And I'm talking about total health, mind, body, spirit, soul, everything. It's easy when you have been severely damaged, particularly through a trauma of grief of watching a loved one die. The devastation that that causes, it's very easy to go to a dark place, to a negative place. And so the visionary mindset must discipline itself by carefully watching out for when that darkness, that pain, and other negative influences can creep in. And it goes further than that. I told you that I'm always learning, and I particularly enjoy watching, for example, educational programming and even YouTube. Well, here's the truth. YouTube is fabulous and you can learn incredible stuff, and YouTube opens the door for a lot of information that you're not going to get from mainstream media. Let's just be honest about it. Mainstream media, to me personally, appears to me to have a bit of an agenda. It has its place in society and it's a necessary, sometimes evil, but it's still necessary. But it's nice to be able to be equipped through the fact that you also have the love of learning to be able to analyze, study, and dig deeper and peel back layers and find more fact and ferret out what is just bunk and get the bunk out. As my friend says, you debunk something, you're getting what is just pure, unadulterated old wives' tales and lies. But in the visionary mindset, the key is find truth and be a seeker of truth and be hungry for truth. So the visionary mindset is learning through the seeking of truth. And then those images, that knowledge, the way that it pictures, the way you see it, your mental picture of it, I should say, the way you see it as well as what you visually see, that establishes for you a grounded type of thinking process. And then what you must do is you must control what your thoughts are. You've got to eliminate the negative thoughts. You've got to eliminate the negative self-talk. You have got to bring yourself to the place where you speak with forward thinking, affirmations, not grandiose affirmations. I'm talking about sound, effective, cognitive, real world living. That's visionary mindset because it also allows you to visualize in your mind potentiality. And potentiality is important. I do the podcast. I try as much as possible to do it every week. I try to keep it consistent, but it's not always consistent. But I continually try to do it week by week by week. And in doing it, then I put it out there in the hopes that over time there will be people that will connect and follow and like and share what it is that I'm talking about here in this podcast. So this is a visualization process as well. I see the best results. I saw myself as a TEDx speaker years ago. When it finally came and I reached it, it was one of the greatest moments of my life. I think I gave something that's very meaningful but it's not meaningful to everybody. My message is special to people who are somewhat or somewhere in the same arena, niche, whatever you call it, tribe, following. We get each other because we understand this thing about grief. By the way, I didn't mention this, but I want to point something out. My grief situation, my most significant life-altering grief situation was the death of my wife, who I was in love with for over 46 years, and I was married to for almost 46 years, but she died 2.5 months before we would have had our 46th wedding anniversary. That was a life-altering moment. Not everybody comes back from something like that. And those that come back damaged sometimes have lives that it's almost as if they'd be better off dead than alive. And that's sad. I don't wish that on anybody. And I met people who have allowed bitterness to fester. And that bitterness has changed them from the person that they were into someone that's almost unrecognizable. So this important statement is that my talking to you about dealing with that kind of loss is not the only thing that represents grief, because grief happens in a divorce. Grief happens in the loss of a job. Grief happens in a broken relationship. Grief occurs when you suffer financial devastation. There are many things that cause grief. The death of a pet. Trust me, that's a grief moment because I've been there and I've done that and I know that. And guess what? It never gets easier. I wanted to also tell you that this June the 2nd of this year, 2026, will be the 7th anniversary of the death of my wife. I'm shocked at the fact that it's been 7 years. It feels like it just happened yesterday. Is it easier? No. It still hurts. Deeply hurts. It's very painful. But functionality and meaningful purpose, a mechanism to be able to, here it comes, live forward, is still very much there. Now, the last E in resolve, which I just was talking about in the previous episodes, is an important component. And there are days when it happens so spontaneously. But I would be willing to say, at the risk of falling into disfavor with some people who have a different thought process, that when I say this, I'll get pushback. There are days when I just simply don't feel enthused. And I have begun to realize that enthusiasm can be created by taking action. Engage in spite of the fact that you don't really feel like it. Let the resilience force you and drive you to resist the temptation to simply want to go in there and climb underneath the covers, turn out the lights, close the curtains, and try to shut yourself off from life. But the problem is life goes on and things go on, and there are expectations that still have to be met. So enthusiasm is sometimes something that you just don't seem to have it in you. And this is where I had mentioned in our last episode that sometimes you have to intentionally choose to will yourself to be enthused. But I will say this, you can't sit here and just think about things that give you an enthusiastic mindset. You must engage. You must get out there and do, and in doing, you serve. You must lay a framework that creates the environment for helping you to build that enthusiasm. You must learn from not just the things that increase your knowledge, but also the things that talk to the pain points that you have so that you can better understand why you feel the way you do and change how you talk to yourself and think and what images you allow to come into your mind. You need to visualize positive things and productive things and useful and beneficial things. And let me give you one more quick thing here. Visualizing sometimes is recalling beautiful memories, breathtaking memories. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do an episode in the not too distant future on how to think of that which was breathtakingly wonderful. You've had experiences in life. When you had them and experienced them, they took your breath away. They left you with an incredibly overwhelmed emotion of joy, almost of ecstasy. Those are good thoughts. We might just talk about those because they tie themselves to that visionary mindset, but they also tie themselves to how you can change the way your brain is working and you can alter the chemicals that are being put out. And you can start, because let's just be honest with you. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and every aspect of us, starting with our brain and going all through our body, has an interactive chemical and neurological activity taking place. That chemical and neurological activity has a physical response. Now, am I a doctor? Am I a psychologist or a mental health counselor? No. But I know fact from what I've learned and read and heard from the experts who do. There are people out there who understand the science of the mind. And these individuals know what they're talking about. And what they're saying is true. And if you were to take the time and the patience and listen, you discover that you are the only one that has control over what your mind allows yourself to believe, see, achieve, and dwell upon. These are things that are very, very important to me. It's why I do what I do. And it's why I look forward to talking with you in these forthcoming episodes about this journey of resolving to live forward. And that living forward, in fact, is something you must choose to do. I want to thank you for joining me today on this special episode. I look forward, by the grace of God, to seeing you again at this time next week. I will remind you, Resolve to Live Forward is on Spotify. It's on the Apple podcast channel. It's also on other podcast channels. It's available audio form, and there are video forms of it as well. And I have a YouTube channel where these podcasts are produced and published. My email address is johnmorrowcoaching@gmail.com. johnmorrowcoaching@gmail.com. And I want to thank Buzzsprout, the hosting service, for making this podcast possible and providing me with the analytical feedback to let me know who I'm connecting with and how successful I'm doing. But I would especially covet the opportunity to hear from you with your encouragement, your questions, your praise, and your stories of your personal events if you are so inclined and moved to do so. This is John Morrow, inviting you to join me about this time next week again as we talk about how we resolve to live forward. Until then, please, please, please have a great day, and thanks for joining me. Bye for now.